YouTube, once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. We're talking a little Auburn football here on a very bipolar weather-wise Saturday afternoon here in the Deep South. It was raining a little bit earlier today, but now it started to kind of taper off to get a little bit humid once again down here in the Deep South. And we're talking a little college football, and in the South, college football is king. And on the plains of Auburn, the battle cry is War Eagle. Come on, guys, let's go ahead and get this comment section active. We're talking a little Auburn football today, just days before media days, SEC media days. As a matter of fact, that's one of the more exciting preseason events. This event will be taking place in Hoover, Alabama at the Hyatt Regency. Just in case you're in town, you might want to stop by. And it's so many fans, so many reporters will be in town. And on the list for the first day, Monday, July the 15th, you're talking Dan Mullen, Ed Orgeron out of LSU, and Barry Odom, and the list goes on and on. Gus Malzahn will actually make his appearance to address the media July the 18th, and there's a star-studded amount of players that will be attending this thing. You talk about from Alabama, Jerry Jeudy, Tua Tagovailoa. Auburn will be featuring Derek Brown, Marlon Davidson, Prince Tega Wanagu. Florida, interestingly, will have Felipe Franks and Lamichael Perine. Lamichael Perine, I think, will be a premier running back in the SEC. I got a chance to catch a little video footage on him. Very, very huge event coming this particular weekend. And when you think about it, there are going to be some questions that are going to come Gus Malzahn's way. It's no secret that Gus Malzahn is one of the main coaches coming into the 2019 season on the hypothetical hot seat, and probably for good reason. He squandered some opportunities along the way to put Auburn in position to be where, I mean, they could be light years ahead of where they are now. But you talk about a national championship appearance in 2013. You sandwich that with a couple of 8-5 seasons, low as 7-6. Kind of started to look like it was going to turn the corner with a 10-4 record in 2017, and then tapering back down to the 8-5 seasons in 2018. Some of the things that Auburn just absolutely cannot do, which is, why I believe Auburn is where they are now. And these are some questions that will probably be asked. You talk about the lack of offensive production. For the first time in almost 10 years, Auburn did not have a 1,000-yard rusher. You talk about Boobie Whitlow, who got close. I would even go out on a limb and say if it were not for injuries, would have been that 1,000-yard rusher to keep the tradition going. Some other things that this Auburn team was not good at in 2018 was third down conversions. And a lot of that came down to play selection. I think about like the Mississippi State game and the Georgia game, where there were plenty of opportunities in short down situations where Auburn just couldn't execute. Also, special teams took a huge step back. Because it used to be pretty reliable as Auburn, as far as field goal kicking goes, with Daniel Carlson, who was over about 80%. He never missed an extra point. But then his brother, Anders Carlson, comes in with 60% field goal percentage. That's something that didn't help the Auburn offense out as well, because that was usually a reliable thing. I mean, it was to the point where if Auburn crossed the 50-yard line, you were guaranteed to get 3 points. But that was not the case in 2018. As a matter of fact, Anders Carlson missed a couple of key field goals, one in the Washington game and also one in the Mississippi State game, which could have proven very detrimental. I'll go out on a limb and say if it had not been for a turnover by Washington in the red zone in a very uncharacteristic run-pass option from Washington creating a turnover, Auburn gets the football and the rest is history in that particular game. Also, another thing that Auburn has to work on is time of possession and also red zone scoring. Showed up, I'm talking about like just showed up in neon lights in the Washington game, where Auburn probably could have put that game away early with 5 trips in the red zone, 1 touchdown. As a matter of fact, that touchdown was on a very low percentage pass play to Sal Cannella. And then you're talking about field goals, and that kept Washington in the game. Washington even took a lead late and almost had a chance to actually beat Auburn by 2 scores, but some things happened in Auburn's favor for the Tigers to pull that particular game off. So there's a lot of questions that Gus Malzahn is going to have to answer. He's going to be asked these questions, and we will see what approach, at least verbally in the media days, that Gus Malzahn will, how he will approach these particular questions. I mean, of course, media days is a huge deal, like I said before, for the SEC. Gives the fans a chance to kind of get a sneak preview as to what's expected or what's going to happen in the regular season. We're still doing our coaches spotlight, and I would like to just really tell the story for you guys dating back to the Tommy Tuberville era for the Auburn Tigers. You're looking at a time where Auburn played very well on defense. You're talking about his first couple of years, a little over 20-something points per game. But during the height of his career, Tommy Tuberville-wise, as a defensive-minded coach, Auburn enjoyed some of the best defensive production probably in school history. You're talking about strings of years where Auburn allowed significantly less than 20 points per game. And it was really fun to watch. And we probably don't necessarily remember for sure why we like the Tommy Tuberville coached era. But one of the reasons why I liked them is because they played so well on defense. As a matter of fact, Travis Williams, who is currently the Auburn co-defensive coordinator, was a middle linebacker on the 2004 Auburn football team that went 13-0 and had quite possibly a few votes swayed away from meeting USC in the national championship. Ironically, that would have been the third straight year that Auburn would have facing USC in California in 2002, then again in 2003 in Auburn in a very unique home-to-home series against USC. Would have been the third straight year. USC goes on to thrash Oklahoma, and Auburn, of course, beating Virginia Tech in the Sugar Bowl that year. So either way, as we look at this, Tommy Tuberville's teams played very well on defense. As a matter of fact, in 2004, they only allowed 11.3 yards per game, which is astounding considering the SEC at that time. In 2005, you're looking at only allowing 15.5. 2006 only allowing 13.9 points per game in an 11-2 effort. 2007 only allowing 16.9 points in a 9-4 effort. 2008, even in the last year when Tommy Tuberville, went 5-7, 2-6 in the SEC, teams were only allowed 18 points per game. So the defense still continued to play well, but, of course, that was a very, very lackluster year for the Auburn Tigers. But then you talk about in 2009, an epic jump in defensive production, allowing 27 points per game. 2010, the national championship year, allowing 24 points per game. 2011, they allowed an astounding 28.9 points per game. So needless to say, after the Tommy Tuberville era, Auburn defense really, really collapsed in epic proportion. And it was really embarrassing in 2012, arguably the worst year in that most of us can document for the Auburn Tigers at 3-9, 0-8 in the SEC. Average scoring 18 points themselves and 28.3 points per game, including a 63-21 loss to Texas A&M. 2013 begins the Gus Malzahn era. Things didn't get too much better, even in a national championship appearance for the Tigers. Gus Malzahn's defense allows 24 points per game. So defense is not getting better. Now you're starting to add up 4 or 5 years of consecutive tapering down of the Auburn defense, culminating with a 26.7 point effort in 2014, 26 points per game allowed in 2015. So between 2009 and 2015, Auburn allowed upward in the average of about 24 to 25 points per game, which was very, very uncharacteristic for an Auburn Tiger football team, at least during the Tommy Tuberville era. And when you look at this, even in 1998, or better yet, even 1997, Auburn's 10-3, great team, played well on defense, only allowed 19.2 per game. Here's where I'm going with this, guys. In order for Auburn to be successful, defense is definitely going to be paramount for this particular team. Now, we talk about, as we go into the media days and we talk about our coaching spotlights here for the last few days, Auburn welcomes Kevin Steele, a veteran in defensive coaching, especially in the SEC. Has had several tenures, had hung out with Alabama for a while, even coached at Clemson. Definitely has great experience as a defensive-minded coach. During his tenure at Auburn between 2016 and up to date, the teams have not averaged anywhere, not necessarily close, but have not eclipsed the 20-point per game mark against Kevin Steele. Even with a 52 to 21 point effort last season, Kevin Steele, on average, as a defensive coordinator, has only averaged about 19 points per game, which is huge for the Auburn Tigers. But we think about this as we have such a great defensive coach in Kevin Steele. And then you talk about Gus Malzahn's offensive production, and you're like, okay, if we can ever match Gus Malzahn's effort as an offensive-minded coach, and then you get this defensive-minded coach in Kevin Steele, you put the two together, you might possibly have a national championship. Has not been the case. As the defense started to trend in the quote-unquote right direction, Auburn's offense surprisingly trended backwards. Well, what happened? Gus Malzahn decides to play the CEO role back in 2015, I would say, because the play calling quality started to change. The production started to change, really showed his head in 2016. It had not been for the emergence of Kerryon Johnson in 2017, because it was headed in that same direction as well in 2017. 2018 was really the culmination of the rapid decline offensively. Auburn just could not get it done. Some games scoring, averaging as low as 200 yards in a game. Still beat Texas A&M with 225 yards of offensive production. But we look at Kevin Steele, though. The spotlight is on Kevin Steele as we go into the 2019 season. One thing that's great about Kevin Steele is he has an excellent group of coaches around him, which I think is stellar. You talk about defensive line coach Rodney Gardner, which I think is huge. You talk about secondary coaches, Marcus Woodson and Wesley McGriff. And then you talk about the fact that you have Travis Williams, who's eating it up on the recruiting trail as your co-defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. But here's some challenges, even within this Kevin Steele coach defense. One thing, at least when we look at the 2018 season, some trends that have to change for Kevin Steele. Well, number one, down that stretch between Mississippi State and Alabama, during the most important portions of the season, Auburn allowed 488 yards per game, 28 points per game, 20-something first downs per game. Those are trends that have to stop. Some even more, when you start to really, really dive into the trends that need to stop, is the fact that Auburn can't get guys off the field, allowing about 20 to 22 first downs per game. One really, really dangerous trend that I noticed from the Auburn Tigers in doing video footage analysis on Auburn this year is in several key games, including Mississippi State and Georgia and Texas A&M even, Auburn had a very, very bad habit of allowing touchdowns just before halftime. A lot of you guys might not have caught that, but see, even Washington, I think, scored a touchdown right before halftime. And what happens is, a team scoring a touchdown right before halftime is almost like getting an interception, because if you score at halftime, or a turnover, if you score at halftime and then you get the ball right back, that's synonymous to a turnover when you really look at it. So let's say Georgia scores a touchdown right before halftime, and then Georgia gets the ball right back to start the second half, and then they score, for example, you're talking about a really quick 14 to 10 point swing. And that could prove deadly down the stretch, and it could definitely change the momentum of a game. So that's why I feel these are some trends that have to change. Also, if we look at from last year, and I think Wesley McGriff and Marcus Woodson can help. Now, here's the deal with Wesley McGriff and Marcus Woodson. They both bring a lot of skill coaching-wise to the table, and what they said was, look, we're going to intertwine our talents. I'm going to coach the cornerback sometimes. Wesley McGriff is going to coach the safety sometimes. We're going to interconnect this thing to where we're giving our student athletes the best opportunity to be successful. We're showing them a diverse level of coaching is pretty much what they're saying. So what has to happen, guys? One, we feel that Auburn will have one of the best defensive lines in the country. We've talked about that ad nauseum. Also, we feel that Auburn will have a little bit more elitism at the linebacker position to cover those plays that say Deshaun Davis just couldn't get to. The only issue with this is, with a brand new slate of linebackers, one key area I'm looking at is KJ Britt. KJ Britt, I'm not sure. I think he's a great linebacker. I think he's a great athlete. But you talk about the level of leadership that's required to be a middle linebacker in the SEC. I'm not saying he can't do it. We just haven't seen it yet. And Deshaun Davis displayed that type of leadership. He was like a coach on the field. It was just from an ability standpoint, certain plays that he just couldn't make. But we feel this lineup will just be a little bit more athletic. And then you bring on Owen Papo, one of the best linebacker recruits in the 2019 class, will get some playing time. So we feel that area will be good as well. And also, you talk about, for the first time, I feel, in Kevin Steele's tenure, he will have elite talent in the secondary. It won't be like one guy like Carlton Davis and everybody else. With Noah Igbenogany coming back, I think Noah Igbenogany will really benefit from the coaching of Wesley McGriff and Charles Woodson. Marcus Woodson, I'm sorry. I think he will be probably on pace to be an all-SEC cornerback this year. Then you talk about, Javaris Davis finally in the right position as a boundary cornerback. My favorite thing is the depth in the safety position. You're talking about Jamian Sherwood, Smoke Monday, Jeremiah Denson, and Daniel Thomas. I think that's going to be probably one of the best secondary depth in the SEC this year. And then the X factor, Christian Tutt, one of the best athletes in the secondary. I really like the fact that he's going to be playing that nickel position for the Auburn Tigers, so that will be huge. Kevin Steele, guys, I think, it's great that Auburn has been able to retain Kevin Steele. He has definitely been an asset to the Auburn program. Once again, here on the podcast on a beautiful Saturday afternoon, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart for Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn, where it's always great to be an Auburn Tiger. The battle cry on the plains is War Eagle. We look forward to Media Days that starts Monday. We will have coverage here on this channel, War Eagle.